The stars were silent above Earth, but everyone could feel the fear. In the great orbiting command station, Captain Aria Morgan stood before the massive window, her eyes locked on the void beyond. Out there, deep in the dark, the alien fleet was coming. They were called the Vorn Dominion, rulers of 1,000 worlds, masters of countless slaves, the so-called gods of the galaxy, and today, they had come to teach humanity a lesson. Every screen across Earth showed the same image. Hundreds of alien ships entering the solar system, their hulls glowing with blue energy. News channels called it the end of the human dream. Civilians cried, soldiers stood ready, and children asked if the stars would still shine after the battle. On the bridge of the human flagship Eclipse, Aria took a deep breath. Her crew waited for her command, young officers, engineers, and pilots, all with the same silent question in their eyes. Can we win this? She looked at them and spoke softly. They think one fleet can stop us. They have no idea who we are. The enemy commander's voice came through the comms, cold and full of arrogance. Humans, surrender your world, your weapons, and your hope. Your history ends today. The crew stayed quiet, some shaking with fear, others gripping their consoles tighter. But Aria only smiled. History never ends, it changes hands, she said. The Eclipse was not the biggest ship, but it carried something no other fleet had. The spirit of Earth, every bolt, every wire, every drop of fuel came from the desperate will of people who refused to die quietly. Outside, smaller human ships moved into position, their formation tight but fragile. The alien fleet outnumbered them 50-1, their size so massive they blocked starlight itself. From the moon's surface, defensive cannons powered up, massive lasers humming with energy. The first alien volley came, a wave of plasma fire crossing the void. 2 human frigates exploded instantly, fire blossoming like brief suns. The Eclipse shook, alarms blaring, metal groaning, but it held firm. Shields at 60%, shouted the tactical officer. Hold the line, Aria ordered calmly. Her hands gripped the console, her eyes never blinking. Target their lead carrier, aim for the reactor line, she commanded. Ma'am, their shields are stronger than ours, a young lieutenant said, his voice trembling. Aria nodded. Then we aim harder. The Eclipse fired, a streak of golden light cutting through the dark. The alien carrier shuddered but didn't fall, its shields rippling like water. Then it returned fire, a beam slicing across the battlefield, tearing through a human cruiser. Hundreds died in seconds, and yet the rest did not retreat. On Earth, every transmission went silent. People watching the sky as flashes lit up the heavens, mothers whispered prayers, soldiers clenched their fists, and the world held its breath. Inside the Eclipse, an engineer shouted, Captain, Reactor 3 is unstable, we can't hold much longer. Aria walked to the center of the bridge, her voice steady. Then we don't hold, we fight. Tell the fleet to retreat to formation Echo 7. The crew hesitated. Echo 7? One asked, that leads us into the dark side of Mars. Aria smiled faintly. Exactly. The command was sent, and one by one, the human ships began to fall back. To the enemy, it looked like retreat, like fear. But to Aria, it was the next move in a greater game. The alien commander laughed across the channel. Running already, little humans? One fleet was enough, you see. Aria looked at the stars, her voice calm. One fleet is never enough. As the Eclipse moved behind Mars, the ship disappeared from alien sensors. One moment it was there, the next, gone. The enemy thought it destroyed. But deep within the red planet's shadow, something stirred. Massive hangar doors opened beneath the surface, revealing structures unknown to the galaxy. Inside them, engineers worked in silence, scientists monitored glowing energy cores, and Aria stepped into a dark chamber where ancient symbols pulsed with blue light. Project Silence, she whispered. It's time. Her second-in-command, Commander Ray Donovan, looked uneasy. Captain, if we use it now, we may not control the reaction. Aria turned to him, her eyes hard. We don't need control, we need a miracle. Outside, the alien fleet continued to bombard Mars, unaware their targets were gone. Aria watched from a hidden viewport as massive explosions rippled across the planet's surface. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. She whispered to herself, They thought they ended us, but they only woke us. As the eclipse descended into the underground dock, the last human transmissions were sent out across the stars. Static filled the airwaves, broken by a single faint voice, a child speaking softly. "We're still here." Then silence. The alien commander leaned back in his chair, confident and smiling. "To ashes, they have fallen," he said. But far beneath Mars, humanity prepared to rewrite the stars, and in that silence, the galaxy began to tremble. The universe believed humanity was gone. Alien news channels showed burning cities and falling ships, their anchors laughing, their people cheering. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Earth had fallen, the humans were finished. But deep beneath the red sands of Mars, far below the ruined colonies, something ancient was waking. Captain Aria Morgan stood inside the underground command chamber, surrounded by glowing blue lights and quiet humming machines. Her uniform was torn, her face pale, but her eyes burned with fire. Around her, engineers and scientists worked silently, no music, no talking, only the sound of purpose. Above them, alien scanners searched the planet. The surface, but not even one could detect what hid below. This was Project Silence, humanity's most secret creation. A plan born from desperation and genius, a weapon not of destruction but of disappearance. It could hide an entire fleet, bend light itself, and make the stars forget you were ever there. It was not ready, not tested, but time was no longer a luxury. Aria looked at the main console, her hand shaking slightly. "Is the core stable?" she asked. Dr. Kieran Lowe, head scientist of Project Silence, looked up, his face lit by the blue glow of the control screen. "Stable enough to vanish a planet," he said quietly, "but unstable enough to take us with it." Aria smiled faintly. "Then let's not give it the chance." She turned to her officers. "Signal every ship that survived the battle. Tell them to regroup below the surface. We move tonight." Commander Ray Donovan hesitated. "Captain, if we move now, the aliens will detect our energy surge." Aria looked straight into his eyes. "Let them. We will teach them the meaning of silence." Far above Mars, the Vorn Dominion's fleet orbited lazily, their commander bored and confident. He sent a broadcast across the galaxy, his voice proud and cruel. "The human species has been erased, their worlds burned, their fleet lies in ashes." Cheers echoed across alien worlds, but the truth lay hidden beneath their celebration. In the dark tunnels below, the human fleet powered up quietly. Dozens of ships hummed with low energy, their lights dimmed, their engines silent. Technicians whispered codes, pilots closed their eyes, praying. The eclipse stood at the center of it all, its hull scorched but alive, its heart beating once more. Aria stood on the bridge, her reflection staring back at her from the glass. She remembered the screams, the fire, the ships falling apart, and then she remembered the child's voice that echoed through. "Oh, the comms! We're still here." Her voice was cold but full of strength. "Activate the silence field." The lights flickered, alarms buzzed softly, and then everything went dark. A strange vibration moved through the ship like the hum of something alive. Outside, Mars began to fade from alien sensors. To the Vorn, it looked as if the planet itself was vanishing into the void. The alien commander frowned, confused. "Report," he ordered. His officers looked at their screens in disbelief. "Sir, Mars is gone. Our scanners read..." "Nothing." "Nothing?" the commander growled. "Yes, sir, as if the planet never existed." He laughed nervously. "Impossible. No species could hide an entire planet." But deep down, fear began to creep into his voice. Back under the red dust, the eclipse floated in perfect darkness, every system silent, every sound swallowed. Aria whispered to her crew, "No signals, no light, no movement. We are ghosts now." For hours they drifted unseen, listening to the distant crackle of alien transmissions. Then a faint message appeared on their screen, a transmission intercepted from the alien fleet. It was the voice of the alien commander, trembling slightly. "The humans have vanished, perhaps. Perhaps they were more than we thought." The crew smiled quietly, the first smile in days. But Aria didn't smile. She knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had survived, but survival was not victory. Victory required something more. something the galaxy would never forget. Dr. Kieran approached her. Captain, the silence field will not hold forever. It drains the ship's core. Arya nodded. I know. That's why we'll use it to strike. Strike? He asked, his eyes wide. Yes, she said softly. While they celebrate, while they sleep, we'll remind them that silence doesn't mean peace. She opened a secret file on her console, labeled Operation Echo Fire. Inside were coordinates for multiple enemy supply hubs, shipyards, and relay stations. Every place that fed the alien empire's power, Arya's plan was simple. Cut their supply lines, burn their pride, and vanish again before they could see her coming. Captain, Ray said, that's suicide. Arya looked at him, her voice calm and deadly. No, Commander, that's strategy. Outside, Mars shimmered faintly for one last moment before disappearing completely. To the galaxy, it was a mystery. To humanity, it was rebirth. Far away, on a distant alien moon, a group of traders picked up a faint broken signal. It was weak, full of static, but one phrase repeated again and again. Human fleet operational, humanity endures, Phase 2 commencing. The traders froze, their faces pale. One of them whispered, but they were gone. Another replied, then maybe the silence is lying. Deep in the dark, aboard the Eclipse, Arya looked at the stars that could no longer see her. She whispered to herself, you wanted silence, now you'll live in it. And as the engines powered up, one by one, humanity's lost fleet vanished into the black. The stars above burned quietly, unaware that their peace had just ended. The galaxy slept in false peace, believing humanity was nothing more than a whisper in history. But in the dark void beyond Mars, something was moving, something unseen, something human. The Eclipse drifted through the black, engine silent, hull invisible, under the cloak of Project Silence. Its crew had not seen sunlight in days, only the soft blue glow of their control panels. Captain Arya Morgan stood in silence, watching endless stars that could no longer find her ship. To the galaxy, humanity was gone, but to Arya, this was only the beginning of war. Reports came in from distant scanners, alien patrols missing, supply lines collapsing, ships vanishing without trace. The Vorn Dominion called it system failure, but fear began to spread through their ranks. Every night, another convoy went silent, another signal faded from their maps, and the rumor began to spread. The humans were still out there, unseen, unstoppable, ghosts in the dark. Inside the Eclipse, Commander Ray studied a holographic map filled with red marks. 6 more patrols gone, Captain, he said, his voice low. They can't explain it. Arya nodded slowly, her expression calm. Good, she whispered. Fear is a weapon too. Dr. Kieran stepped closer, frowning. Captain, the silence field is draining faster now. We can't keep this up forever. Arya turned to him. We don't need forever, Doctor. We just need them to believe we are everywhere. Outside, a faint ripple moved through the void. A shimmer of invisible ships gliding past each other like shadows. These were the survivors of Earth's defense, reborn as the Phantom Fleet. Each vessel cloaked, armed, and deadly. Their mission was not to conquer, but to haunt. They struck in silence, vanishing before their enemies could scream. The alien commander, Lord Varkesh, watched his screens in disbelief. Find them, he roared. Find these ghosts. His officers hesitated. We can't, sir. Our scanners show nothing. Varkesh slammed his clawed hand on the table. Then burn everything until we find them. Soon, innocent colonies began to fall under his rage. Alien civilians burned and chaos spread. The galaxy began to see the Vorn not as heroes but as monsters. And while they destroyed themselves in madness, humanity waited. On board the Eclipse, Arya received a secret transmission from an intercepted Vorn signal. It was a desperate call for help. Unknown attackers, unknown technology, entire fleet lost, request reinforcements. Arya smiled. Unknown attackers, she repeated softly. Good. Let them stay unknown. But not all was calm. Deep in the engineering bay, strange vibrations began to pulse through the hull. Lights flickered, systems glitched, and the silence field wavered for a brief second. Captain, Kieran called out. The field is unstable again. If we push it too hard, it might collapse. Arya turned, her voice quiet but firm. If it collapses, they'll see us. If they see us, we die. So we push harder. Moments later, the ship's alarms blinked red. An alien recon drone had appeared nearby, its scanners glowing bright green. "Contact," shouted the sensor officer. "It's scanning the region." Arya raised her hand. "Don't move, don't fire, let the silence do its job." The drone passed close to the eclipse, only a few hundred meters away. The crew held their breath, hearts pounding. For one terrible moment, the drone's sensors flickered toward them, then passed, moving away. The crew exhaled together. Arya smiled slightly. Even the stars can't find us now. Later that night, Arya recorded a message. Her voice calm, her words meant for history. "To any human who hears this, remember, we are not gone. We are the ghosts that walk among stars, and our silence will be their nightmare." Commander Ray approached her quietly. "Captain, how long can we keep doing this?" Arya didn't look up. "Until the galaxy forgets how to laugh." Meanwhile, across the Vorn Empire, strange things began to happen. A battleship found floating empty, its crew gone without trace, a cargo hub destroyed from inside, its own systems turned against it. Everywhere whispers spread. The humans are coming. The ghosts are real. Do not speak of Earth. In the shadows of a dying nebula, the Eclipse and her fleet gathered once more. They had become legends, myths, invisible avengers drifting through eternity. But Arya knew the next phase was near. Fear was good, but fire was better. She turned to her bridge crew. "We've hidden long enough. It's time they see the light." Commander Ray frowned. "You mean to strike openly?" Arya nodded. "Yes, the galaxy must see who we are, not just fear our ghosts." Kieran's eyes widened. "Captain, if we decloak, they'll throw every ship they have at us." Arya looked through the glass at the distant glow of alien worts. "LDS. "That's exactly what I want," she said, her voice quiet but dangerous. She pressed a button, revealing the coordinates of an ancient battlefield, the place where humanity first fell. "Set course," she ordered. "We'll rise where we were broken." As the fleet turned, the silence field shimmered one last time before fading away, and for the first time in months, the stars could see humanity again. Dozens of ships, scarred but alive, engines blazing like suns. They emerged from the shadows like vengeful spirits. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Vorn commander felt the sudden return of hundreds of red signals on his scanner. His voice broke as he whispered, "They were gone. How are they back?" The answer came through an intercepted human transmission, calm and cold. "We never left." And as the stars began to burn again, the ghosts of humanity prepared to speak, not with words, but with fire. The darkness that once protected humanity began to break. For months, the Eclipse and her fleet had moved unseen, striking like whispers, vanishing like ghosts. But now Captain Arya Morgan knew the time for silence was over. The galaxy had forgotten what human fire felt like, and she intended to remind them. In the hidden depths of Jupiter's shadow, a massive structure began to glow. It was called the Solar Forge, a human creation built in secret during the final days of the Old War. It drew power from the sun itself, bending plasma and light into weapons no alien had ever seen. It was humanity's last gift to itself, and its greatest threat to the galaxy. Inside the Eclipse, the air was tense, the crew silent as Arya watched the power levels rise. "Report," she said, her voice calm but cold. Dr. Kieran stood at the console, eyes wide as he read the data. "Captain, the forge is active, but the energy is unstable. If we channel it wrong, the sun itself could tear apart." Arya's expression didn't change. "Then we don't miss." Commander Ray stepped closer. "Captain, are you sure this is the moment? Once we light the forge, there's no going back." Arya looked out too. He viewport at the glowing structure beyond. "There was no going back the moment they burned Earth," she replied quietly. Far away, in the heart of the Vorn Dominion, the alien council gathered in panic. Their fleets had vanished, their colonies were silent, and every sensor pulse came back empty. "Find them," the Supreme Chancellor hissed. "Find the humans before they strike again." But it was already too late. Back at Jupiter, the Eclipse linked its systems to the forge, golden light crawling across its hull like veins of fire. The silence of months turned into a low rumble, like the breath of something ancient waking up. "Captain," Kieran whispered, "the output is climbing beyond safe limits." Arya smiled faintly. Good. Let them feel unsafe for once. Across the solar system, human ships emerged from hiding. The solar wings, born from the forge's light, their armor shimmered like living fire, wings of plasma stretching across the void. They moved in perfect silence, forming a circle around the eclipse. For the first time since Earth's fall, the human fleet stood in open light. The alien scouts detected the sudden surge of energy and sent out warnings. Unidentified fleet near Sol system, massive energy readings, impossible composition. The report reached Lord Varkesh, who stared at his screens in disbelief. Impossible, he said. We destroyed them. But as the visuals appeared, his blood turned cold. The image showed dozens of glowing ships, moving with precision and purpose. Human ships. Send everything, he ordered, his voice trembling. Every ship we have. And so, the Vorn armada, thousands strong, descended toward the solar forge. Inside the eclipse, the alarms turned red. Enemy fleets inbound, 3 million kilometers in closing, shouted Ray. Arya's face remained calm, her hands steady. Let them come, she said softly. They wanted to see thons. Fire, now they will. The first wave arrived, filling space with blue energy blasts and plasma storms. Human ships maneuvered with deadly grace, vanishing behind solar flares and reappearing in streaks of golden light. Every hit they took only fed the forge's power, converting destruction into strength. Kieran gasped. The forge is feeding on their attacks, it's adapting. Arya nodded slowly. Like us. The aliens didn't understand. They kept firing, feeding the very thing that would destroy them. The eclipse rose above the battlefield, its entire hull burning with sunlight. Open the solar core, Arya commanded. Her crew hesitated. Captain, the radiation will... Do it, she said, her voice unshakable. The eclipse unfolded its front panels, revealing a massive sphere of contained plasma. The heart of the forge. It pulsed like a living sun, lighting up the dark side of Jupiter. The alien fleet paused for a moment, blinded by the brilliance, and then humanity spoke, not with words but with light. The forge fired, a beam so bright it turned night into day across half the solar system. The energy sliced through enemy ships like paper, leaving behind trails of glowing ash. Thousands of alien vessels disappeared in a single breath. The transmission across the galaxy went silent. Then one terrified voice echoed over the comms. It's the humans. They've become the light. Inside the eclipse, the crew watched in awe and horror as their power unleashed. Kieran whispered, "This isn't a weapon. It's rebirth." Arya closed her eyes for a moment. "No, Doctor. It's justice." The beam faded slowly, leaving a graveyard of melted metal and drifting fire. Jupiter's storms glowed golden, reflecting humanity's vengeance across the void. For a moment no one spoke. Then Arya turned to her crew. "Transmit the message." Ray nodded and pressed the command. Across every open frequency in the galaxy, a single voice echoed. Arya's voice. "You laughed at our fall, you mocked our silence, now hear our fire." Her tone was calm, controlled, and terrifying. "Humanity does not fade. We rise again and again until the stars remember our name." The message spread like wildfire, carried by fear and awe. Every alien world watched the sky in silence. Every empire trembled. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what humanity truly was. Not the weakest species, not the youngest, but the storm that burned worlds clean. As the eclipse drifted through the glowing remains, Arya whispered to herself. They thought silence was surrender, but silence was only the breath before the fire. And as the light faded from Jupiter's orbit, the stars themselves seemed to burn a little brighter, because humanity had awakened. And the galaxy would never sleep again. The galaxy was burning in fear. For centuries, the alien empires had ruled every corner of the stars, laughing at the small blue planet called Earth. Now that same planet had risen from the ashes, wrapped in fire, and the laughter had died. Across hundreds of systems, the name human spread like a storm. Entire fleets went silent, colonies stopped sending transmissions, and trade routes vanished into the dark. The galaxy had always feared war, but this This was something else. This was judgment. Inside the Great Vorn Council chamber, chaos filled the air. Dozens of alien leaders shouted over one another, their voices trembling. "They destroyed our fleet," one screamed. "They used the sun as a weapon," another cried. And at the center, Lord Varkesh stood frozen, staring at the holographic image of Jupiter still glowing like a wound in space. "How?" he whispered. "How did they do this?" No one had an answer. All they knew was that the humans, the species they once mocked, had returned, and nothing could stop them. Far from the council, deep in the outer sectors, the Eclipse and her fleet drifted through the ruins of enemy space. Everywhere. Here they passed. Silence followed. Destroyed shipyards, empty outposts, and quiet worlds where alien civilians hid behind closed doors. Arya Morgan stood on the bridge, her face calm but her eyes heavy. "Report," she said quietly. Commander Ray replied, "No resistance, Captain. Every fleet we encounter retreats before we even fire." Arya nodded slowly. They finally learned fear. Dr. Kieran stepped closer, concern in his eyes. "Captain, we've won battle after battle, but victory isn't the same as peace." Arya looked out into the void, her reflection flickering in the glass. "Peace is for those who forget," she said softly, "and the galaxy must never forget." In the Vorn capital, desperation grew. The empires that once fought each other for power now united in panic. They sent envoys, begging for mercy, offering treaties and surrender. But humanity did not answer. The silence terrified them more than the fire. Rumors began to spread that the humans had created an army of light, that their ships could pass through matter, that even death could not stop them. And with every rumor, more worlds turned against their own rulers. Rebellions erupted across alien territories. Slaves broke free, soldiers refused orders, and banners of resistance rose under one symbol. The burning circle of Earth. Everywhere, the people whispered the same words. "If humans can fight gods, so can we." Arya's fleet began receiving distress calls, not from enemies, but from oppressed worlds. "Help us," they said. "The empires fall, but we still suffer." Arya listened in silence, then finally spoke. "Set course for the nearest signal. We don't conquer. We free." Commander Ray looked surprised. "You want to help them? After all they did to us?" Arya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "They're afraid, Ray, just like we were, and fear needs hope to survive." When the Eclipse arrived at the first colony, the aliens expected death. Instead, humanity brought food, medicine, and light. They repaired what war had broken, and for the first time in history, alien and human stood side by side, not as enemies, but as survivors. News spread faster than light. The humans were not destroyers. They were liberators. The empires that had ruled for millennia began to crumble from within. World by world, system by system, their power turned to dust. But peace was fragile. In the shadows of a dying empire, Lord Varkesh gathered the last of his elite fleets. He refused to surrender, refused to accept defeat. He looked at the hologram of Earth and growled, "They will not end us. We will end them." And in his rage, he activated something ancient. A weapon buried long before humanity was born. The Oblivion Crown. A doomsday engine capable of tearing stars apart. Far away, Arya's sensors detected the energy spike. "Captain," Kieran said urgently, "massive readings from the Vorn core system. It's off the charts." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Varkesh," she whispered. Ray frowned. "He's going to burn his own worlds just to take us with him." Arya looked at the glowing map, millions of lives at risk. Her voice was steady but full of fire. "Then we stop him, no matter what it costs." The crew looked at her, tired, bruised, but ready. No one questioned, no one hesitated. The Eclipse turned toward the heart of the galaxy, toward the dying empire's last weapon. As the engines ignited, Arya whispered, "The fire cleansed the stars. Now it's time to rebuild them." Behind her, the fleet followed, hundreds of ships moving through the wreckage of fallen empires, glowing faintly like embers carried by wind. Everywhere they passed, the galaxy watched, some with hope, others with fear. Because everyone knew, when humanity moved, history changed, and far in the Vorn system, The Oblivion Crown began to awaken, its power pulsing brighter than suns, its core hungry for destruction. Varkesh smiled, madness in his eyes. "Let the stars burn," he said. But somewhere deep in the void, Arya's voice echoed through an open channel. "No, Varkesh. Only your empire will." And as the human fleet entered the dying light of the Vorn homeworld, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, because this was not just the fall of an empire, it was the rise of humanity, the moment when every world in the galaxy realized the age of aliens was ending, and the age of mankind had begun. The stars around the Vorn homeworld burned red. What was once the center of a proud empire was now a graveyard of light. Destroyed ships drifted through the black, their hulls glowing like dying embers, and in the heart of that chaos, the Oblivion Crown began to awaken. Captain Arya Morgan stood on the bridge of the eclipse, her face calm but her eyes full of fire. Before her, the holographic display showed the impossible, a weapon the size of a moon, pulsing with unstable energy. Dr. Kieran stared at the readings in disbelief. "Captain, that thing is drawing power from the system star. It's feeding on it." Arya nodded slowly. "Then if we don't stop it, the star itself will die." Commander Ray clenched his fists. "If it detonates, the entire sector will burn." Arya looked at the burning red glow ahead, her voice soft but firm. "Then this is where it ends." Across the galaxy, alien eyes watched the last human broadcast, a simple transmission. The eclipse flying straight toward the heart of the Vorn Empire. No retreat, no hesitation, no surrender. Every world held its breath. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's fire. Now it would witness its courage. Inside the alien command citadel, Lord Varkesh stood before the control throne of the Oblivion Crown, his body wounded, his mind cracked, his voice a whisper of hatred. "They think they can erase us," he hissed, "but we will take them all with us." He placed his clawed hand on the ignition crystal. "Let the stars burn," he said, and the entire planet began to shake. Back aboard the Eclipse, alarms screamed. "Captain, the weapons core is reaching critical levels," shouted Kieran. "If it goes off, nothing within 3 light years survives." Arya's voice was steady. "Then we make sure it doesn't go off." She turned to her crew, her family. "Prepare the solar core," she commanded. Ray looked shocked. "Captain, if we use the solar core inside this gravity field, we'll destroy ourselves." Arya looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "Sometimes the fire must burn itself to end the darkness." The crew didn't argue. They had followed her through silence, through fear, through fire. They would follow her into the end of the universe if she asked. Engines roared, light filled the bridge, and the Eclipse dove straight into the storm. The Oblivion Crown loomed before them, its surface alive with lightning and molten metal. Inside it, millions of energy veins pulsed like the heartbeat of a dying god. The human fleet spread out, covering Arya's path, forming a shield wall against the chaos. "Protect the Eclipse," Ray shouted over the comms. "No one breaks formation." The first wave of alien defenders struck, desperate and wild. The sky filled with explosions, metal and screams. Human ships burned, but none turned away. They fought not for victory, but for meaning. For every name that had been lost when Earth fell, inside the Eclipse the temperature rose, metal groaned, systems flickered. Kieran shouted, "Core overload in 60 seconds." Arya whispered to herself, "That's enough." She opened a direct channel to the fleet. "This is Captain Morgan," she said softly. "If you hear my voice, know that humanity does not die in silence, we rise in it." Ray looked at her, his eyes wet. "Captain, please don't." She turned to him. "You have the fleet now, Ray. Take them home." He shook his head. "There's no home without you." Arya smiled gently. "There will be because you'll build it." She stepped to the center console, pressing her hand against the activation crystal. "Solar core online," Kieran whispered, his voice breaking. The entire ship began to glow, its hull turning pure gold, light flooding through every deck. Outside, even the alien ships paused, blinded by the brilliance. Varkesh saw it through his dying screens, his voice shaking with rage. "No, you cannot." But it was too late. Arya's voice echoed through the comms one last time, calm and resolute. "For Earth, for the silence, for the fire." And then she spoke the final order. "Eclipse protocol, engage." The solar core ignited. A wave of golden light burst outward, silent and endless. It consumed the Oblivion crown, melted through its armor, and swallowed its power whole. For a heartbeat, the galaxy went blind. Every star, every ship, every planet felt the pulse of that light. Then, silence. The explosion faded slowly, leaving behind a quiet void where the Vorn homeworld once was. No fire, no screams, no sound, only a single burning sun where death had been. Far away, the remaining human ships drifted in awe. They searched for the eclipse, but there was nothing. Only a signal, faint and soft, repeating through the static. Light never dies. Commander Ray bowed his head. Tears fell down his face as he whispered, "She did it." Dr. Kieran stood beside him, eyes fixed on the glowing sun in the distance. "That's not death," he said quietly. "That's legacy." All across the galaxy, the story spread. The human captain who faced an empire and turned death into dawn, the ship that burned brighter than the stars, and the silence that followed was not fear. It was respect. The empires were gone, but something greater had begun. A new age where every world whispered one name. Humanity. The galaxy had gone quiet. Where there had once been the roar of endless war, there was only stillness. No fleets moved. No council spoke. No empire dared to rise. Only the echo of light remained. The last heartbeat of the eclipse in the weeks that followed. Fragments of human ships drifted through the black, some damaged, some dark, but all alive. Commander Ray sat on the bridge of the Vigilant, the new flagship born from wreckage and grief. Before him, the sun that had consumed the Vorn homeworld still burned, golden and eternal. It was not a star anymore. It was a monument, a reminder that one woman's fire had changed the galaxy forever. Dr. Kieran stood beside him, his voice low and heavy. "She really did it," he said. "The Oblivion crown, the Vorn, everything. Gone." Ray nodded slowly. "She gave us silence," he said. "And now we have to decide what to do with it." All across the stars, strange things began to happen. On distant colonies, human beacons long thought destroyed began to flicker again. Signals whispered through deep space. Coordinates, messages, fragments of Arya's final transmission. But some said the signals weren't from her ship. Some said the eclipse had never truly been destroyed, that it had crossed the barrier of light and vanished into the deep void beyond known space. Every night, Ray stood by the viewport watching the silent sun. Sometimes, he thought he could hear her voice carried through the static. "Keep the fire alive," it whispered. "Never let them forget." The surviving human fleet began rebuilding, not on Earth but in orbit around the new star. They called it Solus Eterna, the eternal sun. It became both home and symbol, a place where species once enslaved by the Vorn came seeking refuge. They came with fear in their eyes and hope in their hearts, and humanity welcomed them, not as masters but as equals. Years passed and the legend grew. Children across the galaxy learned of the Captain of Fire, the woman who defied empires and turned death into dawn. Her story became myth, told around campfires on desert moons and whispered in the corridors of ships they sent to Armada. Aid her soul lived in the eternal sun, that every flare of light was her watching, protecting, remembering, but peace as always was fragile. In the shadows beyond the rim, something stirred. Old remnants of empires, warlords, scavengers hungry for power. They whispered that humanity had gone soft, that the fire was fading. Ray knew better. He gathered his captains, stood before the fleet, and spoke words that echoed Arya's legacy. "Fire doesn't fade," he said. "It changes shape. It becomes what the darkness fears next." Under his command, the Solar Wing fleet rose again, not to conquer but to patrol, to protect the fragile peace their captain had bought with her life. Their ships carried a single mark on their hulls, a golden circle, the symbol of the sun. And wherever that mark appeared, chaos ended. Because the galaxy had learned that when humans moved, the universe listened. On the anniversary of the battle, Ray returned alone to the edge of the eternal sun. He activated an old beacon, one of Arya's final recordings. Her voice filled the bridge, soft, steady, eternal. "If you hear this," she said, "then the light still burns. Remember, Humanity's strength was never in its weapons, but in its will. When the stars grow quiet, listen. You'll hear us in the silence. Ray smiled faintly. We never stopped listening, Captain, he whispered. As he turned away, a strange pulse shimmered through the star. For just a moment, sensors detected something. A faint signal deep within the light, call sign ECL-01, the eclipse. The crew froze, eyes wide. Kieran gasped. It can't be, she's... Ray interrupted, his voice trembling. She's out there. The signal vanished a second later, lost in the solar flares, but hope had returned. The story spread faster than any war ever had. The eclipse still flies, they said. The captain still watches. And so, in every corner of the galaxy, whenever the night was darkest, people looked up at the stars and whispered her name like a prayer, because the silence that followed. And the fire was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater, the rebirth of a species, the dawn of an age. The universe had seen what humans could do when pushed to the edge, and it would never make that mistake again. As the Vigilant and her fleet sailed past the eternal sun, the light reflected across their hulls like rivers of gold. Ray stood tall, his voice carried through every ship. Remember what she taught us, he said. We are not conquerors. We are the flame that refuses to die. And in that moment, across the black sea of stars, it seemed as if the galaxy itself bowed. The suns burned brighter, the void whispered softly, and somewhere far beyond light's reach, a woman's voice answered through the silence. We're still here. The stars burned quietly once more, not in fear, not in sorrow, but in reverence, because the fire of humanity had become eternal. And in that endless silence, the universe finally understood. Humanity's greatest weapon was not destruction, it was the unyielding will to rise again.